Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, fairy creatures of all kinds, welcome back to In the Eyes of Truth. Today we have a new guest, Chris Emms. Chris hails from the foggy island off the west coast, and he is a cryptocurrency expert, and he's now if he doesn't mind me saying as much, a political refugee in Russia.
Why, hello there. Come hither, boys and girls, and hear the magical tale of the magic monetary theory. That's right. You no longer have to worry about all the pesky gold and silver to buy what you want. Just print, print, print. And when Marco Polo traveled to ancient China in the 1200s, the Mongol Khans of China showed him their magic monetary theory, where they had pure fiat paper money, and they could just print whatever they needed for whatever they wanted to buy. But alas, even that story had a dark ending. For the magic monetary theory unleashed the twin beasts, the tidal wave of debt ridden by the beast of inflation. And when Marco Polo returned to China 20 years later, there were no Mongol Khans of China anymore. China had just gone through a vicious civil war that was sponsored by a total economic collapse. Let's fast forward 800 years. And the modern monetary theory is all the rage in the Western leadership. That's right, you no longer have to worry about debt. Debt no longer matters. No, just print, print, print all you need. But yet, the twin beasts are back. The tsunami of debt swallows up whole nations, causing defaults, causing collapses in currency, destroying people, destroying their lives. The beast of inflation swallows up your hard-earned wealth. The products that cost $126 back in 22 now cost well over $400 in 24. That's right, hyperinflation is here. What do you do to save your hard-earned wealth? Where do you go? You go to gold, not paper gold, physical gold. And you don't keep that gold in the United States, where in 1932 the government confiscated gold. It'll do it again. You don't keep it in Western Europe that's collapsing before our very eyes. Where do you go? What do? You come to exitstrategy.world, the company that's going to help you find the safe haven for your gold and your well-being. Exitstrategy.world, the saviors in this dark fairy tale.
With a very interesting backstory. So, Chris, tell us a bit about yourself before we talk about crypto and everything.
Sure. Well, first, Stanislav, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm a religious watcher, and it's always interesting. You always have so many interesting people that you interview regularly. So a bit about my background, I guess. So as you said, I come from the UK, that foggy island off the coast of, which is now, used to be our colony. We're now definitely yours.
My past home.
But your past home, exactly. Yeah. So, born there. Grew up in the south of Spain, of all places, actually. So I got to learn how to speak Spanish, which is a great language in your youth, because it's very good for meeting girls. I think in business it's probably not the best, but anyway.
True, very
so
true.
Then sort of made my way through. Made my way through life. Originally was a theatre student, went to become an actor. Decided I didn't like it, so dropped out, and ended up in the tech world. My first job was, we were just talking about it before the show, but my first job was working for Apple. I worked in the Apple store in Regent Street in London, and had a break when I met by accident one of the original founders of Spotify, and ended up in their business team. Then went on to have sort of a tech, a bit of luck. Went on to have a bit of a tech career, worked for Google for a while, and then ended up working in tech startup companies in Berlin, in Germany, in my early 20s. And sort of accidentally ended up working in crypto, by working for a payments company that was offering me a lot more money than I'd ever earned anywhere else, and ended up working for them, and then really went down the rabbit hole of the crypto industry. Quit that job, built my own first business dealing with consulting um, from 2016 onwards, consulting the wild west of crypto as it was then, as it kind of is now, but it's a little more regulated, and trying to, the irony of my story, trying to fit regulation into an unregulated industry. But obviously, the United States government didn't see it that way in the end. But yeah, that's the brief nuts and bolts.
Tell us how you wound up in Russia. Your little sojourn to the closed kingdom. Not Russia. Russia is actually pretty open. The other closed kingdom, North Korea. And what happened? How all that tied together to Uncle Sam?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's so much stuff online. I'm sure people after this can Google, just put my name in a Google search and you'll see a very interesting wanted poster. But really, the story goes like this. In those days of crypto, there was a cryptocurrency conference everywhere in the world any week. And as a young single man, there was nothing more fun than traveling around the world and speaking at these conferences. People would usually pay you to go. You get your flights booked, sometimes business class, which is nice, and you would go. At the time, I had a pretty interesting job. I was working for a company called Bitcoin.com, which was it still is the second or maybe even the largest cryptocurrency wallet in the world. And I used to get all sorts of weird and wild requests to speak at all sorts of different things. And as a young man, eventually I got a request in my LinkedIn inbox saying, "Hey, would you like to speak at a cryptocurrency conference in North Korea?" Again, maybe you can call it naivety of being young. I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" But I wasn't
the first one on your
naive.
block to say, "I've been to North Korea and I'm alive."
Well, yeah, it was something like that. I'm not sure what was really going through my mind. But I wasn't that dumb to the respect that I consulted the British Embassy in Pyongyang, being from the UK, Pyongyang being the capital of North Korea, or the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, as is the full title. And basically the email I got back from them is, "Look, we don't recommend you go, but you're a British citizen, so you can go. You're not American, so there's no law that prohibits you from going." So I thought, okay, fine, that's enough. As I think most people who are not sanctions lawyers would have thought would be enough. Especially in those days, we're not in the kind of world that we live in right now. The context is very different. At that time, then President Trump was hugging the leader of North Korea on the border and planting trees with him. So it's a different context, which when we went over there. So off I went to North Korea. I'd never met any of the other people we were going with. I didn't know any of them, in spite of what the United States likes to say. Never met any of them. And we went there, and to be honest, it was quite a the same as what you would have seen in any YouTube video you ever seen on visiting the DPRK. We went and saw the Juche Tower. We went around. We went to the DMZ and looked at the Americans on the other side. All the stuff that you would see. Yeah, hey, and then you've got all the cameras pointing at you from that side. But really uneventful. We'd gone there on the guise of doing this cryptocurrency conference, but you can't really call it a conference, right? So in North Korea, obviously it doesn't come probably as a shock to anyone watching this, but you don't sort of go and give your own speech. Everything is pre-translated, pre-approved by the government, who essentially are there's no real private enterprise in North Korea. There's a government that runs everything. It's the old USSR, maybe even more on steroids than that.
More.
Yeah.
The USSR actually had some private businesses.
Yeah, some. I mean, there's really none at all. So it wasn't like you could go and give a speech on whatever you wanted and you could, freestyle it and say whatever you wanted. Very scripted. To be honest, so we go to this conference, if you like. We talk, and basically everything we've got has been copied and pasted off Google, and they said, "Look, make sense of that and speak about it." So that's essentially what we did in there. But it was so boring, and I think they would admit there that it was so boring that everyone fell asleep, more or less, in the room, including myself, and I was one of the people speaking, right?
Oh, God.
So you can imagine how uninteresting this is. But the most important thing is everything we've spoken about was off Google. So it's not like we and the very basis of cryptocurrency is that it is open source, right? So everything is literally on Google.
So
The issue
who
that
else spoke with
yeah,
him? Who else was on
that's
this?
where we get really interesting. So there were a few different Europeans there. There was a guy from Argentina who caused us a few problems because he brought pornography.
I can't hear you. You're switch off. No sound.
Am I there?
Yep, you're back.
Oh, okay. Hang on. You know, I'm going to turn my phone off. I didn't think my phone was linked to this thing, but maybe it is. Okay, it's off.
So last thing was Argentina, pornography, North Korea.
So we
Bad
had an
combination.
Argentinian guy that has a very bad idea, decided to bring pornography into North Korea. And obviously, before you go there, well, that's kind of common sense. It's like if you go to, well, even if I went into, I don't know, Saudi Arabia or any kind of country that has conservative values, which they have, you wouldn't bring in it was a homemade sex tape, if that's interesting to people.
Was it interesting?
I never got to see it. We were just embarrassingly told by the North Korean guides that they'd uncovered this particular piece of content when they obviously they check, they go through and check all your devices when you arrive for whatever reason they do that. So but the most important person that was there really, and the one that caused, let's say, the havoc that I went through, was a guy called Virgil Griffith. Now, Virgil was an American citizen, is an American citizen, a very, very smart data scientist, and one of the founders of a cryptocurrency project called Ethereum that people may have been heard of. He was,
of course.
Yeah, the lead data scientist of that project. Now, I had never met Virgil in my life. I wasn't in those echelons of crypto where I'd met these kind of guys. So I'd never met him before in my life. And so Virgil gets up and he speaks. And to be honest, it was such a joke that one of the videos, the pictures the FBI had, it was me and Virgil in, North Korean like Mao suits. So it was such a joke that we were walking around in these things one of the days because it was just a laugh at the end of the day. It was nothing serious. So okay, so we get back from North Korea. I didn't think anything of it. I thought, well, that was an interesting thing. Would I go again? Don't know. I've seen that. I could basically tick it off the bucket list that I've been to North Korea. Anyway, unfortunately, Virgil decided to go into the US Embassy in Singapore and tell them about his trip. Thinking as the kind of person, again, I don't know him very well, but my impression of him when I met him for this week trip that we did there, just very naive.
Very naive.
Thinking that those guys in there were his friends. So he went in as a US citizen to try and be helpful to them. And obviously, the rest is history in terms of what happened to him. My life changed really in 2019 on the day after Thanksgiving. Obviously, I'm British, so we don't celebrate that holiday. Right. But I will always remember it. I was at home at the time. I was living in Malta, and I was at home. And I'd had a few people over for dinner, because there was my life was a lot of conferences. There was a conference in town and I invite a few people over, as you do when you've got friends visiting from different places. And I get a message from someone. They're like, have you seen this? I open it up and there is an indictment with Virgil's name on. Virgil Griffiths detained on Thanksgiving 2019 at, I think it was LAX or whichever airport he'd flown into, on these charges. And if anyone has had the misfortune of ever reading a federal US indictment and worried if their name's on it, which unfortunately is happening to a lot of our friends now who are working in different Russian media circles, as you and I, you can pretty much work out, even though they seal your name, if it's you, just because of the level of detail they give about that person. And I was like, that's me. I know 100% it's me.
5'2", blonde hair, wears his hair braided to the left.
Basically, yeah.
Blue eyes, kind of left tooth missing. But it's not you, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. But you got an idea. So that changed my life. I was the next day. My girlfriend at the time, we were due to go on holiday to Bali. So we went, and while I was in Bali, I thought, well, what am I going to do? So I called a friend who was an attorney in the US, like a general counsel lawyer, but the guy I knew really well from doing different crypto work. And he gave me a colleague of his as a lawyer. Called the lawyer and I said, look, dude, I know this is me. What do I do? And the guy was sort of like, I wouldn't worry too much about it. You're a British citizen. This law, Virgil was indicted under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which is a presidential decree, thereby it only should apply to US citizens. And it specifies that very clearly in the decree. Because the president of the US is not my president. I don't hold a US passport, never have. I've never been a US resident, so it's nothing to do with me. No, but that's not really the case.
Yeah, wait a minute. The exceptional country decides that everybody is under its laws.
Absolutely.
And so, Mars, on the Earth, on the Moon, and Mars, it doesn't matter. You're all under.
Absolutely, yeah. The Martians are under US law. Well, that's actually how it is, but this lawyer, he was like, I don't think this really applies to you. And I was like, no. Reach out to the Southern District, which was prosecuting the case. I said, ask them. I'm willing to clear this up. Because I was like, in my head, I'd done absolutely nothing wrong. I mean, we'd gone to this stupid, bizarre conference. We'd said a load of stuff that was all publicly available. So I was like, this can't go anywhere. And in the time, I thought maybe I can help Virgil. Maybe I can just explain, because I know this guy's a bit, how would I say? He's very on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Goes back, he goes, they're not interested in talking to you. But of course, now I've got the time in mind going on in my head. So I decided at that point, I'm going to move and make my life in Dubai. And whether I stay or not, I don't know. But obviously that then went on. I ended up being there for a few years. So how do we go from here? Basically, I've got this, I would say it's like a sword of Damocles over my head. So I'm reading Virgil getting put in the horrible, first of all, now the Metropolitan Detention Center that's still open, but there was another very infamous prison in New York, which essentially they're like dungeons, right? And they're putting this poor guy in there. And I was reading all this stuff, and you can imagine what that's doing in your head. I'm thinking, okay, I'm next here. So you kind of for those few years, life was very strange. I mean, it was very hard to sort of, you had to keep yourself mentally strong and go through it. I hired a prison consultant, for example, in the US. I did all this kind of stuff.
Wait. There's actually prison consultants?
Oh, yeah. There's
shit, really?
That you can hire before you go in to kind of help you understand.
I saw it in a movie once, but I thought it was a comedy. So, I just... actual
really,
prison consultant.
A prison consultant.
Oh, my God.
Done time.
Oh,
yeah. Actually, it was kind of useful for me in a way, because it did psychologically prepare me for what came next. So, anyway,
don't drop the bar of soap in the shower.
Yeah, don't drop the bar of soap in the shower. Yeah, basically, a little more to it than that. But yeah, it's kind of it's like how to be a good boy and maybe get out a bit earlier, sort of thing, is what they're going to teach you. Wow. And kind of how to go through the process of sentencing, which is, again, that's a whole deal that you make inside the US justice system as well, right? It's all bizarre. Anyway, so we go through the motions of this. Anyway, eventually we get to the point where Virgil's about to go to trial. At this point, the lawyer calls me up and goes, Chris, I've just, funny, we because I check in with this lawyer, and, that people will never realize how expensive, they're not from the US. And people from the US probably don't know how much cheaper lawyers are outside of the US. I mean, each phone call is thousands of dollars, right? For half an hour. It's not a cheap exercise. It's, you need to sell your home if you're going to challenge a federal indictment in the US, no matter what it is.
That's if you own a very large home.
Absolutely. You need to own a very large home and be fortunate enough to, be able to do that. Otherwise, you're going to get a public defender that's just basically, you might as well represent yourself in most cases. Anyway, so we go through, so he says, look, the FBI, they want to talk to you and they're going to offer you this thing. I was like, okay, cool, let's do it. He's like, they're going to offer you this thing called a proffer agreement. I was like, okay, well, what's this? Because we don't have this in the UK. We don't have this in Europe. Essentially, a proffer agreement is an agreement you sign with the US government, which basically says that whatever you discuss with them, they are seeing whether they want to offer you a deal to be a cooperating witness against the defendant. And I thought, morally, I felt a bit bad about that, but I thought, you know what, this has been going on for so long. Let's see what happens. Anyway, so we go through this, and you can imagine, so this is how much we did, and we did it all through Zoom because it was via COVID.
I was going to say the next question: did you go to a U.S. embassy or
no? Which worked in my favor, right? Because I think if I'd have walked in, I wouldn't have come out.
Right.
So because they don't care about these pieces of paper, they'll rip it up if they want to. That you can see so many cases where they just lure people and do stuff. So anyway, went through this 27 hours right?
Holy crap.
You can imagine, so 27 hours of this. I think it was about 27. It's in the 20s of something hours. You've got 3 attorneys on the call from my side, all charging exorbitant amounts of money, right? You've got me by the district, what you call AUSA, assistant US attorney, which is basically the prosecutor, for 27 hours, trying to go over all this stuff. Absolutely mental. And they ask you to go over everything you've ever done in your life. But what they will do in that, what they're actually doing there, it's the biggest trap that anyone can fall into. I would say to anyone that ends up there, do never cooperate with these people, because they're not actually looking to help you. They're looking to find something that will, strengthen their case against you most of the time. This basically means where you say, F you, I'm not going to do it. So you're basically completely screwed. So we went through the whole thing, and they said, look, Chris, we're all good. We're interested. And I said, well, how does it work now? And they said, well, Chris, you see, you can fly into the US. You'll go in front of the judge. You'll plead guilty. Okay. And he said, but you got to convince the judge that you're actually guilty, right? You can't, because the judge is going to ask us whether this is actually legit. I'm like, okay, so, right, okay.
So fine. There's a big S at this point on your forehead,
and then I said,
sucker, right?
Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, but what happens after that? And they said, well, what we do is after the trial, when you go for your sentencing, we basically write, I think it's a 4K1, or it's got a name. It's basically a letter they submit to the judge. Say, Chris is a really good guy. He's helped us out, so don't be too hard on him. And I was like, well, does that mean, okay, so the deal here is, I don't know, I could go to jail. You can't tell me for how long. You can't give me a deal which basically immunizes me from this. And you can't give me you can't basically say, look, if you do this, you're going to get a suspended sentence, which basically means, and a fine and whatever, which I was happy to have, right? So then on top of it, they go, oh yeah, and Chris, there was this video online that we asked you about from 2017, where you were interviewed by someone about a crypto project. And you said that this, it basically was a project called Skycoin, which was one of the early projects. And I basically go on, and I was given this sort of hardware from them, which I plugged in. And I said, this hardware is great, it works. And they said, you said it worked, but you don't know whether it worked. So that's wire fraud. Anyway, it gets even more bizarre. So I was like, okay, well, let's go through that, because I'm not a con man. And I'm not even applied. This crime you're allegedly putting me under, it doesn't really apply to me. But can you name one person that was affected by this? That was con? No, we can't. And they said, oh, we also need you to do this. We need you to sign. We've taken this to Puerto Rico, where you said this, to the district of Puerto Rico, and the AUSA there has refused to prosecute this case. So I said, so the AUSA in Puerto Rico says there's no case because I haven't committed a crime by saying this. Yeah, but we're going to say you have, and you've got to then pass jurisdiction for us and then plead guilty to it. So this was the whole thing.
So on the upside for them is they get a really good report because they put somebody away for shitload of crimes they didn't commit. And they're begging the judge to say, no, I'm guilty. Please put me away. And the upside for
basically,
you is
that's correct.
What at this point?
Well, exactly. What is the upside? The upside is that I don't probably go to jail. Well, I don't know whether I go to jail or not, but I still would have had to fly to the US, sit under. They were like, look, we'll bail you out. That's no problem. We'll already recommend, and you'll get bailed out. And you can go and live with your friend in Florida.
So you go away to jail.
Okay, so I got to live with my friend and his wife and his kids. But then you have to await sentencing, right? So you're a cooperative witness, right? So there is an indeterminable amount of time. So I was thinking, my poor buddy, like, I'm going to be living with you for years, man, and there's nothing we can do about it because you'll be ordered by the court. Basically, I'll be like, I don't know, your weird adopted son or something for a while, and I won't be able to work, right? Because that's part of the deal. So anyway, basically, I told them where to go, unsurprisingly. And then I just got on with my life again. The lawyer said, look, Chris, that was kind of bad. You told them, where to go. But again, we don't really think that they've got enough to even, extradite you because it's a crime. He said, do you ever want to go back to the US again? I said, well, it'd be nice to visit friends. But to be honest with you, after all this, it's not on my top bucket list of places I need to visit again in my life. Um, so okay, so then we go. So then fast forward to February of 2022. I'm on or end of January, so 2022 February. I can forget the dates. It's all online. I go to Saudi Arabia to speak at a conference. Again, another conference. I'm invited to speak. I go invited by the Saudi Arabian government, by the way, to go. Go to this conference. I'm in Riyadh. I went to Jeddah to see a friend. Okay, fine. But I'm looking forward to get back to Dubai where I live. I actually had a sort of a lunch planned with some fun guys who were doing business together. I thought, really looking forward to it. Get to the airport, check my bag in, usual thing, all good. Walk over to the passport control. And, my passport was pretty tattered. I was used to it because it was just old and, usually, people like that. So I didn't really suspect something. And then suddenly this is taking a very long time. I'm like, okay, what's going on? And then suddenly these two policemen come over and they say, hey, can you come with us? And the policeman just turns to me and he says, America bad, red notice. I'm like, oh, here we go. Okay. Bear in mind, I'd psychologically kind of prepared for this. So actually, it was obviously an awful feeling, but I was kind of ready to go through the motions. I'd already planned what would happen if this would go on. So I was taken downstairs. Basically, all these Saudi policemen have no idea what to do. They're like, this is an English guy. What the hell have we got here? So I'm there and I asked the guy for a cigarette. I'm sat there just smoking with these guys. Eventually, the cuffs come out. You get fingerprinted and I got processed into the jail. I then went the same day. And to be honest, this was probably there's a lot of experiences I had from being incarcerated. But and actually, for me, it sounds really weird, but a lot of it was awful, but some of it was quite positive. And it's positive because of some of the people you meet when you're incarcerated. So the day that I get thrown in there, I'm in a room with loads of guys. And these guys say to me, look, what's the deal? And I'm like, look, okay, this is the thing. And they said, okay, when you go to the next stage, you must resist extradition. Do not agree to it. And I was like, okay. So I get put in the back of a police car. Basically, this awful policeman drives me 4 hours, leaves me while he goes for lunch in the back of a police van in the 46. Anyway, whatever.
Oh,
Normal. This is just. Look, prisons aren't very nice. Prison officers aren't very nice, nor should they be, in my opinion, in most cases for most criminals. So fine. Anyway, eventually I get thrown in this room. I sit there for 8 hours. I'm shackled like this the whole way. Go in front of the prosecutor, and he says, "Look, this is the case. This is what we've got from the Americans. What do you want to do?" I said, "I resist extradition." He's like, okay, cool. He goes, fine. Well, not okay, cool. He's like, okay, fine. And I was like, what happens next? He says, to be honest, Chris, I'm going to bail you out now. So I go back, I get bailed out of the jail and basically live a life then where I'm going in and out of jail constantly because every single time I would challenge. So I managed to get a legal team together and all that stuff. Every time we would have to go to sign documents in the, Saudi legal system, I'd get arrested again. So this kind of went out round. So you get different levels of being incarcerated and being out. So I would have to book hotel rooms with indeterminate stays on them, right? Because you don't know how much. And at the same time, the Americans had blocked all my bank accounts. So there was no access to any of my money, right? So I'm trying to keep the costs down. By this point, I barely got a penny to my name because I've spent millions of dollars on legal to try and fight this thing. Going through this
that's
process.
when you have millions of dollars to spend. So the average,
absolutely, I was very fortunate to have that money.
Yeah,
I was very fortunate to have money. Exactly at that time that I could even fight it that far. But obviously, then that's all gone by the time I got to Saudi. I'm literally starting from zero. It's no joke if you look at all these kind of guys. I was watching an interview with Kevin Spacey the other day, how he said he doesn't have anything left. That's absolutely true. It doesn't matter who you are. If you go against the US justice system or even a civil case where you're fighting it within, a RICO suit or whatever, you'll lose everything. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or you're, whoever you are, you'll lose everything. Yeah. So anyway,
come to Russia.
Exactly. Come to Russia. And don't mess with the US. Just come here and do what you want. So eventually the Saudi judge right at the beginning had said, "There's no case here. This is not a crime in Saudi Arabia. He's a British subject, and we can't do anything." But the police in Saudi Arabia, for whatever reason, and I've always assumed it's because the US embassy were putting pressure on them, would not remove the arrest warrant. So we had to spend ages working through the judicial system with the police to try and remove it, which took 7 months of me going in and out of jail and this kind of dance of, yeah. So, and and obviously at any point I had no idea at any point whether we were going to win or not, because you just don't know what deals are happening, behind the scenes. Anyway, so eventually we won the case. Now, while I was going through this process, I'd already had some connections to Russia. I'd spent a lot of time in Belarus that prior years, but I originally came to Russia in 2017 with a family I was consulting in London, and I really had a great time. And I had a lot of Russian friends in Dubai, and I realized that Russians weren't the evil James Bond villains that most people thought they were. So my first idea was like, and again, because I'd had that fortune to have that time to prepare for this scenario, I already knew what I was going to do. So the first thing I did is I applied for a Russian business visa, set up a Russian company while I was in jail in Saudi, and applied for a visa to enter Russia, basically. And that was always my plan. So when we got through this whole thing, I was like, okay, great. I've got my Russian visa in my passport, because I managed to send the passport to Dubai. There was a whole operation we did to get that done. I was very lucky to have a very good Russian lawyer, Olga Litvinenko, and I had a very good lawyer in Saudi as well, who was incredibly helpful as well. So we got this together. So then we thought, my lawyer in Saudi, he was like, look, I've got it lifted. And I said, but is it really lifted? Because you've been here before. He said, I don't know. So I was like, okay, well, we're going to have to risk it. I'm going to have to leave. How do I get to Russia from Saudi Arabia? Bear in mind, there's no direct flight from Riyadh to Moscow. There was, but when the SMO started, they stopped it. And it was the first week they were ever running that flight. But anyway, so I called a friend of mine, who's a really dear friend of mine, who's a very, I won't name his name, but he's a very famous person in crypto. And I said, look, dude, this is going to sound really weird. He goes, how are you? Doing okay? And he'd always been on the phone with me. I said, dude, I need to get a private jet. I'm going to do this. And I've never flown private before in my life. And I'm like, dude, I need a jet, man, bro. And he's like, Chris, I got you. So we find, and so this gets so bizarre. So then I've got to find it. And he's like, but Chris, there's a budget. Yeah, you've got, I can't remember. It was a lot of money, but it wasn't like mega bucks. He was like, you've got a budget and I'm happy to pay for it. I was like, okay. So then I start having to game off private jet brokers to get the price that's going to afford this thing. So it takes me about a week. Anyway, we get the price, we book the jet. And I mean, so we get to Riyadh, me and my lawyer, I was in Jeddah at the time. That's where I based myself because he was there. So I came to Riyadh. We had one last dinner together and then we went to the airport. Now, we had no idea whether this was going to work, right? So we've got this jet, the most feeble private jet you've ever seen from Turkey lands on the tarmac. I mean,
chickens running down the aisle.
It's a private jet. It's still a private jet. A private jet's a private jet, right? It's still far more luxurious than anything would travel on. The mere mortals like myself would travel on usually. So we get there. We pay a really big fine because the Saudis are charging me for every day I've overstayed my visa. So we pay this fine. I go through. And my lawyer, he's sat on the other side and he's sweating because the amount of time this poor guy, Abdullah, the poor guy had to come into prison. Like can you imagine? We go to fill out a form and he knows I'm going to get banged up in a horrible jail again. And the guy, I just ruined the guy's nerves by this point. So we're there. Anyway, we go through. Guy takes the passport off and I'm like, oh, here we go again. And I've just lost this lot of money from my friend. Comes back. Stamps it. He goes, Chris, you're always welcome in Saudi Arabia. I said, thank you very much. I will not be back again. got on this private jet. And I always remember this. And obviously, these pilots have figured out something's not quite right here on the way over. Because they're like, why would someone book a plane from, a white British guy book a plane from Riyadh to Mahajkala, which was the only closest place for you to fly a jet that would make it work. It's just weird. And so we get on the plane and like, look, Chris, we're not used to do, but you've been here for a while. We take it. I was like, yeah, 7 months ago. It's okay. We put. What do you like to drink? There's vodka, Jack Daniels, beer. I said, I'll have a beer. So we're taking off on the runway from Riyadh. Sort of hit the sky and they go, okay, crack it open. I'm like, oh, first beer I've had in 7 months. So anyway, so fly to Russia, get here, and basically start rebuilding everything. Apply for asylum in Russia based on the case which was always the intention based on the case. Was granted that very quickly within I think, gosh, what was it? within a month. I think I had that granted. RT were really useful when I came here because they'd actually covered my case while I was in Saudi. So they offered me, a bit of an income to get going while I started rebuilding my businesses, which I'll forever be grateful to them for. And sort of here we are there. Met a lovely girl, got married and had a child in the last nearly, well, we're coming up to 2 years. So it's been a wild ride, but it's been a great blessing, and I'm forever thankful for everything that's happened to me here, and how great it is here, and don't regret a thing because here we are and it's all great.
You folks, if you want to reboot your life and tell Uncle Sam to go screw himself,
Yeah.
True, you can't go to Europe after that, at least for now.
Look. I wouldn't recommend my path to anyone as a form of how to get to Russia. If people are looking at that, you can legitimately move here and have a great life, and also probably visit your folks back in the US with no issues. But living here and being here, it's a very safe place. It's a place, as well as I do, coming from, I know not the same kind of story, but you went through your own experiences with that. It's a safe place. It's a place where if you're an entrepreneur, I don't understand why more entrepreneurs aren't here, especially foreign entrepreneurs that can bring that skill set to the Russian market now. It's it's a great place.
And well, for me, I'm in the same boat. I can't go. I can't leave anyways because I've said way too many things. So but it's a good thing you didn't go back to Dubai, because Dubai, it markets itself as safe, but Dubai just recently extradited 10 Russian citizens who came into Dubai to work with the Dubai banks to work through crypto or work around from the U.S. sanctions. They had meetings. But the U.S. wanted them, and Dubai arrested them and sent the whole party off to the U.S. Kidnapped them, basically.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're absolutely right, Stas. I mean, at the end of the day, the UAE has to represent its own interests of its own state, right? And it's the same in Saudi. In Saudi, I would say I was incredibly lucky that for whatever reason a deal wasn't reached between, and I'm 100% sure I was kept there for a reason. That a deal there was some sort of deal that didn't happen, but I was lucky. There is no way. I always am really nervous, especially. We have a lot of colleagues that Westerners that work in the Russian media and whatever guys they do that. I'm always so nervous when if they're Europeans or US nationals or Canadians or whatever. I'm always nervous when they decide to leave Russia to go back and see their folks, because I know there's no rhyme or reason to it either. You could go back in 100 times and they're not going to touch you. And that's what they want you to think. They want you to think you're invincible. Right. And then that's kind of when I went to Saudi. It was kind of me thinking in Dubai, yes, it would have caught up to me then. But at that point in Dubai, it hadn't. And I think they'd come to the decision with Dubai that is not really a case. And I was quite well known in Dubai anyway. But they got me into lured me into a false sense of security, and then bam. So it's I think if you've got that kind of issue, my advice is always do not play with it. If you're safe in Russia, don't leave.
It's well, there are places you can go. I was in North Korea.
There are plenty of countries that are possible to visit, and even in Russia, I mean, we just had our family vacation in Sochi. It's amazing. It's not that much different from going to the south of France or Turkey, really. The infrastructure is phenomenal. So you don't really do you really need to see, I always say to people, do you really need to see the Eiffel Tower? Luckily I've seen it in my life. I'm sure you did too. So I don't need to see it again, but I don't know if you get it. I always get this pity party with some people going, oh, it must be so bad. You can't. I'm like, dude, I've seen all that shit. It was fine, but it's not actually, life has different evolutions. Like, you're a family man, I am, there's more important things to worry about on a daily basis than whether I can see the Eiffel Tower again.
You saw the Eiffel Tower when it was actually clean and not a
maybe I don't
see market around it. We are out of time. Chris, thank you. We've still got so much more to talk about.
Absolutely.
Just this whole case. It's amazing, and the luck and God's grace is amazing.
Absolutely. Thank God.
It's the American justice system, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard this many times.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. And the Russian version's heard it many times from other victims too. So yeah.